All right, today we're going to talk about reading, writing, and comparing decimals. I'm talking about their place value. So the first part we're going to talk about is reading decimals. So some things to know is place value. Every single digit in a number has a place value and it has a specific name. So, for example, this number here, the very first one we've got right here is in the hundredths place. As we move over to the 2, that is in the tens place. Let's move over to the 7s, and that's in the ones place. This is our decimal point. The first place after the decimal point is our tenths place. And then the second place after our decimal point is the hundredths place, hundredths. So there's no oneths place. The very first one after the decimal is the tenths. Then we have the hundredths. So this number is read 127 and 49 hundredths. So we read our regular number just like we've known how to for quite some time, 127. The decimal point is always our and then this is a 49 and it ends in the hundredths place, so it's 49 hundredths. Okay, so let's take a look at some examples. Over here it says name the underlined place value. So this is just kind of like an underpinning. This is something we just need to review. So if I look at the 9, it's our underlined place. It's 2 spaces in our whole number direction. And so we know that that is in our tens place. If we look at our second number here, it's the first place after the decimal point, and that is the tenths. If we look at our number, we have our 1 to 3rd place in our whole number direction, and that is the hundredths place, hundreds. And our last number here has the 8 underlined, which is 2 spaces after the decimal point. The second place after the decimal point we know is the hundredths. Okay. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at these numbers and we're going to write a verbal description, or like how we would read it out loud. Okay, I have a 6 in the tens, a 7 in the ones, and a 5 in the tenths place. So we know that that is 67 and 5 tenths. 67 and a 5 in the tenths place, 5 tenths. Let's take a look at this one. We have 123, that's our regular whole number, and here's a 4, but it's in the hundredths place, so it's 123 and 4 hundredths, okay, because the 4 is in the hundredths place. Now let's take a look at our last one here. We have 67.52. This is a 67, our decimal point is the and, 52. The 2 is in the hundreds, so it's 52 hundredths. So 67 and 52 hundredths. Okay, so that's reading. Let's take a look at writing our decimals. So when we're writing our decimals, we're going to read them out loud to ourselves, and we're going to write a numeral for each number sentence. So here's our first number sentence, and it says 207 and 54 hundredths. So I always like to start with my place value spots, and then I can just fill them in based on what they gave me in the number sentence. So I know that this is the hundredths, the tens, the ones. This is the tenths and the hundredths. So this says 207. So that means there's a 2 in the hundreds. There's a 0 in the tens because it just says 207. So then there's 7 in the ones. So I've taken care of my whole number. My and is right here, so I know all of this is going to be after the decimal point. I have 54 hundredths, so I have a 5 and a 4 that ends in the hundredths place. So it should say 207.54. That's 207 and 54 hundredths. All right, so let's take a look at another one. Read and write a numeral for each number sentence. It says 575 and 63 hundredths. So again, we're going to start off with our place value spots. Hundreds, tens, ones, tenths, and hundredths. Then we're just going to fill in what they give us here. So this says 575. So I have a 5 in the hundreds, I have a 7 in the tens, and then I have a 5 in the ones. 575. Then it says, and, so I know that's my decimal point, 6,300. So I have a 6, I have a 3, and it ends in the hundredths. Okay, so really, as we're breaking down place value, as we're reading these numbers out loud, what we're going to spend most of our time working on is comparing them. So we're going to be comparing decimals. We're going to go all the way out to the hundredth spot. So as we compare decimals, some important things that we need to know. When we're comparing our decimals, we're going to compare each place value. So we're going to start hundredths, tens, ones, tenths. We're going to keep going across until we find one that is different. So after that, we're going to use these symbols to help us complete our statement of inequality. This is our less than symbol. This is our greater than symbol. And this is our equal to symbol. So what we're going to do is we're going to compare each individual place value, find one that is different, and then decide if we should use the greater than, the less than, or the equal to symbol. So let's take a look at this example here. We have 347 and 88 hundredths, and we want to compare it to 347 and 96 hundredths. So just reading it out loud like that, we can determine that 88 hundredths is different than 96 hundredths. But let's go ahead and let's break it down and let's look at the place value. So if we're looking at our threes, I have a 3 in both of my hundred spots. So those are exactly equal. They're not different at all. We're going to move on to the tens. In my 10 spot, I have a 4. Those are exactly equal. Got to keep moving. In my 1 spot, there's a 7. And those are exactly equal. So I'm going to go on to the tenths. And in my tenths, I have an 8 and I have a 9. So 8 is less than 9. So I know that 347 and 88 hundredths is less than 347 and 96 hundredths. And this is my less than symbol, so it'll make my equation, my statement of inequality true. Okay, so let's take a look at some more examples. We're going to compare 12 and 45 hundredths to 12 and 4 hundredths. So let's take a look at our tens place. In both of our tens places, we have a 1. Let's look at our ones place. In both of our ones places, we have a 2. So we're going to move on and we're going to take a look at our tenths place. And in the tenths place, my first number, I have a 4. And on my second number, I have a 0. We know that 4 is greater than 0, so I'm going to put in the greater than symbol to make my inequality statement true. 12 and 45 hundredths is greater than 12 and 4 hundredths. Okay, let's look at another. On this one, we have 8 and 50 hundredths compared to 8 and 5 tenths. So let's go ahead and we're going to compare each of our place values. So I'm going to start in the ones place, and both of my ones places have an 8. So I have to move on to the next place value. In my tenths place, both numbers have a 5. So we're going to move on. And in my hundredths place, my first number has a 0, and my second number doesn't have anything. Okay. So we know that we can add a 0 to the end of any decimal because it's just saying there's 0 in the hundredths place. There's nothing in the hundredths place. There wasn't anything written there. So I can put a 0 there and it doesn't change my number at all. So now as we look, we have an 8, a 5, and a 0 in all of our places. So 8 and 50 hundredths is equal to 8 and 5 tenths.